Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Hi Rogers, can I ask you something?
Shoot.
What does corruption mean?
Well, summarily, corruption is abuse of public power for personal gain or for the benefit of a group to which one owes allegiance. For example, when a public office is abused by an official accepting or soliciting a bribe. By the way, private people can be corrupt too, like bribing police officers to escape fines.
Okay. So exactly how does that concern me?
Well, do you pay taxes?
I guess, yeah. What does that have to do with this?
Everything. Because those taxes you pay are supposed to facilitate services you use, like water, electricity, roads construction, medicines in hospitals, name it.
Okay, that is much bigger than I thought. But it can be stopped, right?
Well, yes, it can, although it may not be as easy as it sounds. And here is the reason why. Corruption roots are grounded in our country's social, political, economic, bureaucratic traditions and policies.
So, what has kept it going this long? I mean, why don't we stop it?
Well, the main reason why it has been here for so long is because institutions are weak, either as a result of poorly defined ethical standards of public service, weak administrative and financial systems, or ineffective watchdog agencies.
What can we do to stop it?
At a national level, we must focus on strengthening the independence and effectiveness of public institutions that fight corruption. At a personal level, we must commit to never giving a bribe.
I promise I'll never give a bribe.
Well, that's a great decision you have made. Me and you now have to spread this message to all our friends. If we all do our part, corruption will be no more.
This message is brought to you by Alternative Digitalk. The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
A very, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to today's edition of the Hotline Show. My name is Roger Studiawe, and it's a very great honor yet again to be in front of this camera this evening to be talking about matters of national importance. I've been joined by two gentlemen, one who is dedicated his mandate to always making sure that we learn a thing or two about things that are happening. He's one who is an expert in especially political commentary and things that happen around governance and the civic space. And so we have learned so much, and so we do appreciate you, sir, for the time that you've dedicated to always being here. We've also been joined by Arinaitwe Rugyendo. I believe it's not his first time to be here, but it's not also, I do believe it's not your first time to be hearing his name, because he's also been on the streets quite long enough, and he's contributed a great deal of information to the public as a journalist himself, I believe.
Yeah. And a seasoned investigator.
And, exactly.
Thank you for the kudos.
Exactly. So
Thank you for the kudos.
This evening we're going to be having a very good discussion. We're going to be focusing on the role of media and research. Now, the interesting thing is one, Rugyendo is both a media personnel and a researcher.
Absolutely.
And just as much as Mr. Ochieno. So it's going to be an interesting discussion, one that is based on facts and people who have the experience in this field. And so I welcome you too for the show. And me and him are sort of the custodians now of the show. So he wants to invite you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. But I think I appeared here before you started appearing here. Most probably.
Yeah.
I must have appeared here before you.
Only that when he came, he stayed.
You became more frequent.
When he came, he stayed.
Host. Yes, now you're co-host.
And so, co-host, very privileged, and it's my responsibility to say that I will wait for you into Nagongira, and you get an egg on behalf of this program.
Absolutely, thank you
so much.
And you've seen the delegation have come with.
The delegation is fantastic. Those are the future.
They'll be very willing to come.
I can't wait to host them.
Absolutely.
This
is a promise. I will come. We shall come.
Mr. Rugyendo, if you could just say a little bit of hello to our viewers.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Hello to our viewers. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope we're going to have a good discussion.
You do.
About nation building. When I looked at that word, 2 words, and was like, yes, I think this is what we need to talk about. Yeah.
All right,
Sure.
we're happy to have you this evening. And how have you been? How is work going over there?
I've been fine. I am not working, but people think I'm working. I am not working. I am just on a sabbatical, an academic sabbatical.
But you're driving such a posh car. I don't
Absolutely.
know the details. You man.
Absolutely.
We can out you.
I know that.
For one who is
Doesn't
unemployed.
matter.
Okay,
The point is that the point is that I am just studying. I'm a scholar, so I'm so busy with school. I'm almost getting done, God willing, by next year.
You're doing
And then I'll be able
PhD?
to, yes, and then I'll be able to really engage, and that will be really serious. We should be engaging at the right time.
You also are the managing editor at Research Finds Uganda.
Yes. Actually,
How is that? How is
yes,
the work
thank
going
you.
over
And
there?
it's a good question. When I went for further studies, then I got to understand that there's so much research out there that doesn't get out into the public domain. It remains on the shelves, but also importantly, it remains in the journals, in the academic journals, where now academicians like ourselves just speak to each other, and that's where it ends. But research, in my view, ought to be also consumed by society because it's meant for it. It's meant to transform lives, transform society. But then to be able to transform society, the consumers of the findings should be able to understand them. So there's a mismatch between research and consumption. There is a mismatch between research and industry. There is a mismatch between research and dissemination and policy making. All this. There is always either they're conflicting or they're not speaking to each other. So I started this publication, this news publication, to try and turn around research findings into news stories. News stories that make it easy for a non-academic audience to understand research, to understand scientific jargon, to understand findings, to understand the usefulness of evidence in policy making. I hope probably we will be able to influence policy. I hope we can be able to bridge the gap between theory and practice. We can also probably bridge the gap between research and industry. And the whole idea is to really spur socio-economic development because you can't talk about development if you don't have evidence, if you don't have the facts.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure Joseph doesn't know about this, but I'll show you when we are out of here. I'm going to show you the details, and probably you could support us with so many other eggs.
You know that's one of the reasons why I'm here.
Thank you. We are going to be getting a little bit in detail about that.
Sure.
Because I think it's also a common area. It's true what you said. Most of the research that happens, which is too much out there, does stay in shelves and between the academics who already know. Now, us who are the common people do not get
And I've actually found out
but
there's no media house on the African continent that is doing it, as its general orientation, as its general focus. Most media are into action news, fine. Active news, fine. But to be specific and oriented towards research,
it's not a common thing.
I'm the first person to do it.
All right. He's also an innovator. You're welcome to the show, Mr. Ochieno.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. I am very well. The only problem, it takes me 4 hours to reach here. As a result of failure of research and planning, if I do not leave my residence 4 hours earlier and then come near here and spend money in order to be within reach of the studios, I will spend 2 hours basically literally crossing Kampala. Part of what Rugyendo is talking about is basically just that. Northern Bypass, when it was built, within 10 years or thereabout, they had to go for re-expansion. Now, this was a project that came up as a bigger visionary plan of the 64, the Greater Kampala Orbital. How this thing died off to some funny shelves, and then these guys came in, started it. Then you start a major road project, and then you do not link projections. It's part linked to what we're talking about, research and planning. Evidence-based. And then you don't know that these guys in the 60s, when they were saying Kampala needs to have a Kampala orbital, and Kampala needs to to be able to accommodate 4 times, perhaps five times the population today, what's going to be needed. Some of those are as basic research as common sense, but they're real. But so no, I did that. So for today, I'm not as much stressed. One of the things that we normally also have on this program, I hope it doesn't happen today, is that in between and halfway our program, power goes off. So if part of that power thing is a failure of infrastructure, then you realize that it will not perhaps sometimes be about only technical issues, but it may simply be about capacity. And again, capacity, how do you project, the demand for electricity, demand for power? And you are not able to link with that with the demand and to consider what the requisite needs of the nation are. It tells you that there is something lacking. I have been asking, do we have Ministry of Planning? What happened with Ministry of Planning and Economic Development as a ministry, which it was some times ago? But that said, yes, I have been delighted to know that I'm meeting my good brother, Rugyendo, with whom we have quite a lot of things in common in terms of thinking.
Absolutely.
And there are some areas where we fundamentally disagree. But those are very minor areas, those are small areas. But on this, it's interesting you saying that, but I don't know that then you had not been following me. You were very busy with the newspaper that you were editing before, which we shall not promote here. From the time I landed on the shores, when I reclaimed my citizenship from NRA in 2005, I was very critical about absence, one, of research in terms of academic research.
Yes.
And part of the drop in terms of the ratings for Makerere University, which was then the Harvard of Africa, is simply because it's partly research.
Yes,
partly,
of
of course,
course.
then it's about publication, because they use this for ratings. And partly then you can actually see the quality of academia. And with respect to my good friends in academia, you meet a PhD lecturer, and then you have conversations about topical issues. You watch them on television trying to push certain other things. When you see professors, and then you basically note there's something lacking. So there is something fundamentally wrong, or something that's gone fundamentally wrong in this country. But of course, Rugyendo is right that then you broaden this to the continent. So when I came in, I was taking onto that. Number two, the very major, and I wrote in my Sunday column in the other publication about Uganda Trypanosomiasis Research Center, strong with that, UTRO in Toronto. This is a powerful research center which has now turned into
I've heard about that. Yes.
Islam. It was East Africa's viral research project. Now, here making it from a broader exemplar thing before coming to the theoretical thing, that was a project. So during COVID, I say, had this industry not died, maybe that's where I would have got the medication and treatment for COVID, rather than having experiments with people going to juju people, or that this one sorts out COVID development, and so go on and on and on. The rail networks, so these are politicized things, but they're actually linked with somebody sitting and say, this is a template of a nation state, and we have so many citizens. The growth in terms of projections, this is what's going to happen. We now have so many graduates. We expect in 10 years the number to be this. This is the current capacity in terms of absorption, in terms of graduates of particular skills, say in engineering or technology. It's the more you do that, the more you suddenly realize the deficit as the economies change, and then you realize that actually we need to invest in particular skills building, capacity building in particular areas. But generally, there is no way that a nation can grow without research. There is no way that this continent will grow without research. As early as the early 60s, I talk politics, but it's real politics. Ochieno Rugyendo, as early as the early 60s, our leaders then started specific projection and investments in particular areas of education, health, different kind of research schemes and things like that. But part of what they were doing, we're saying that, look, we want, as I said, evidence to back our ability and capacities to plan over a projection of 10 years as a government, to 10 years, and when you do plan 10 years as a government, you're not planning that 10 years you must be the government. You plan and build documentations that are backed by the nation state, and whichever party, whichever organization, whichever leaders come in, they come and pick it down there. So I'm mixing it perhaps, but I hope I'm making sense. that many of these things we are talking about, Rogers, as Rugyendo says at the beginning, these are not necessarily political things. These are nation buildings. At a nation building, you think big and you think broad and you think selfless. Yes. And number two. But then three, the journalistic element, which I said, I think it was then, my good brother Andrew Mendes, I think, in 2005, is this. If you notice some of the things we've discussed here, and this partly is part of your job, you realize that when there's a budget day, and these guys, government come and boast, we will did this, we did this, and we'll do this, and we'll do this. And then people come and journalists just write and then scream and repeat the whole thing. What an organized media ought and needs to do is to critique the budget. In fact, the media, the fourth estate, are actually ideally smarter opposition than
the actual
opposition. Because do you know why? They, in normal cases, in established nations with systems and institutions, will be smarter than governing parties. Because you find the governing party has presented a budget, but say an economics editor, say of the Kampala Weekly, for example, and is able to go ahead and spot a hole that maybe the Minister of Finance did not, or planning, is a hole that that the opposition hasn't. Now, you critique, that is why Ochieno is familiar with what happens in other developed nation states. A budget day is not a day for your food to enjoy the cup of tea. The Minister of Finance, after you've done that, you're going to be challenged, you're going to be booked. You will have to explain and justify your figures. You will have to explain and justify, where you're going to get the money from. You're going to explain and justify why you feel with the priorities. And you talk about maybe your 10-year development program, and then you told us this in the last budget, what has happened. Now, I'm simplifying this to qualify the point, the need for research in this way, particularly from a media perspective. Now, because the media as a fourth estate should be relatively independent, you find that when the say business editor for Digitalk questions and lays bare, the budgetary proposal, say on a northern railway line from Kampala to Gulu, or Kampala, say, to Ochieno, it is going to be much more believed. Ideally, it should be much more believed than possibly if Ochieno of UPC says it. Because there is always this assumption that Ochieno of UPC might have an element of political thing onto it. But not necessarily, but generally that's your point. That's what you need to do. Generally, at the end of the day, this is the responsibility of governments. And it's interesting to talk about the question of African governments. I actually don't know on the continent. South Africa was generally not bad at it. Nigeria in the early days used to, but of course with corruption and death of former governments, these things and the institutions collapse. Repeat, whatever you're doing as governments, universities and colleges and institutions where government is supposed to invest, they really will tend to be the leaders in these things. And normally from then you link to questions of patents. From then you link to how we work on innovations. I was just beginning to start with the young friends that I met at reception. I already asked someone about the books she reads. I was being very deliberate there, that if this young citizen and know the circumstances of her, understanding her family is a steadiest family, and then you begin to pick from. That is where you're picking young guys and young minds and young interests. The other day, I was traveling with a doctor, a retired medical doctor, who retired via the UN as a consultant. And one of the things he was telling us, in a very interesting conversation, was that he gained interest when at high school, secondary school actually, he had a broken leg. And then they injected, I think, a broken left leg, and they injected a right leg. And he asked, but the pain is in the left leg. Why? Actually, interesting. Yeah, so he said from then on, because the guys with whom I was in the car, my daughter, people actually laughed and made fun of it. But at the end of the day, actually said it very seriously. It's one of the things that gave him the creative thinking and the thought provocatively to say that, well, I need to have an element of interest in medicine. So there is a cultural element to this. I don't know, I can go on and on and on, but there is nothing as important as doing this. And finally, you link that, that's why you link political parties that have no manifestos. These days, individuals have manifestos. That's why political party manifestos, you know, I'd also say to this program, Rogers, take it seriously. Don't host party leaders who have no clue what a manifesto is. These are programs. They're all linked. And the more we're able to do that, the more we up quality, the more we then know to link with the evidence thing. You can't just come here and say that, well, we as Ochienos, we're going to break the NRA crowds rails and we're going to build rail networks, when I cannot explain to you with your audience reasonably how I should be able to fund that, how realistic it is. You know, and that's why sometimes when I talk some of the historical things, people think it's boring. But no, I'm doing what Rugyendo said, evidence, evidence, evidence.
Thank you so much. Mr. Rugyendo, now you said it's very interesting because you see one who's trying to do research, literally research-based media. Yes? And you said you're the very first one at that. How do you, and I wanted you to break it down very simply and systematically to someone who's watching us from the other side, who's certainly not academic and doesn't know so much as Mr. Ochieno and you. How does the research and the media complement each other, especially for nation building?
Actually, basically, if you're talking about investigative journalism, basically, you're talking about research. Because you're trying to uncover what is unknown and, in most cases, unraveling certain mysteries. You're trying to unravel complexities to be able to explain a situation. And that's what investigative journalism is about, or at least what is in the public domain. Trying to dispel what is the popular opinion in the public domain, or particularly actually the official, probably government position on certain issues. Sometimes we know governments are run by individuals who have their own agenda and definitely they may not really project the situation as it should be. And that's why investigative journalism now becomes important. I'll give you an example. Recently you heard of the Ntungamo files, something. Yes, hospitals, yes. But you see, the situation, the story out there is that the healthcare in Uganda is perfect. It is, it's doing very well, and I mean, we've improved. But we didn't know that, that you can have such situations, especially in the president's backyard. And it's investigative journalism that helps you to shade a proper picture and put it out there for everyone to judge. And that process itself of investigation is a research process. A research process is also investigation. And so now when the two link, media has the opportunity, the advantage, like he said actually, my brother here, Joseph, that media has the advantage of believability. And something that has been unearthed by the media is more likely to be believed than that has been unearthed by a political opposition, for example. Because I think anybody, or even a politician generally, because everybody would think it's just propaganda and somebody just wants to score political points, and that's it. It can be easily be biased. But so for me now, in my case, I decided to say no. I think we need to link the two. Let's link academic research with media and see what can come out of that. And so what we're trying to do is, positions, policies, might be projected in a certain way, but we need to find out whether those policies are backed by research. Currently, actually, what is going on at the Makerere, I heard the other day, and I'm trying to find out actually, a team of experts have just decided to come together to explain, to give evidence around PDM, for example. Why? Because the way it was conceived and then implemented lacked a scientific process, a logical process to justify why it had to be implemented in the way it's being implemented. And I think that's why it's facing lots of challenges in certain areas. Although they have registered some successes in several places, there is still the idea, there's still the lack of logical, some kind of evidential backing on some of the justifications, some of the interventions they make within the PDM process. And Makerere has been asked to really find some some explanations around that to be able to see how to make the PDM probably a better, better implemented. And so what we're doing is we try to mine research products. We try to mine research findings. We try to dig deep into the journals that are where you find all this evidence hidden, and it can only be accessed by academicians, not the ordinary persons, because perhaps you might want to the journal probably asks you access codes which you don't have,
or money,
or even money which you don't have. So what we're doing at Research Finds is to try and find now certain research that has been probably done to explain certain issues. Why do we have a gridlock in Kampala? Probably there's research that has been done, and but the politicians don't know. So it's the role of the media to explain it from a scientific background. Why do we have so much corruption? There are so many studies that have been done on the problem of corruption in this country, on the problem of poor infrastructure in this country, of health care. I've just done a story, and I think it was going to be coming out immediately, a few hours when I'm out of here. Something that explains why there's so much alcoholism amongst pregnant women, especially in the northern region, and there's so many explanations that the researcher has found out. And this researcher actually has done her research. She's from the School of Public Health in Makerere University. Very good research, which can help to explain certain interventions, certain health interventions in northern Uganda, for example. But you realize that interventions at the level of the state tend to be led by politics, not by science. And when you start talking about science in this country, and Joseph, I'm sure you'll agree with me, when you start talking about scientific methods of policy implementation, then I think you're going to be taken as somebody else. I mean, somebody probably who's pro-imperialism, or you're trying to become an enemy of the state, or you're trying to become a saboteur, or an obstruentist. So many words that come around. But you see, there are no states that have really progressed without a strong investment in science, and especially research, if I could say, scientific research.
I wanted to get your perspective on, and one I'm very certain I'd like to get his comment about, is I'm glad you also talked about investigative journalism, which is a thing that brings to light most of the things that are common, I cannot look at. But there has been this, of course, skeptics, especially from government sides, commonly say that investigative journalism sometimes, gets friction from the state because national security, there's always that firewall of national security. You can't talk this about that. How do you think we can make sure that we balance?
We have actually had these arguments before, and I'm a victim of that. But I think there are two reasons. One, I think governments, African governments, I would say, are still fragile. They are still fragile democracies. Democracies actually understand the importance of media in a democracy. You can, there's no democracy that, you cannot talk about a democracy when you don't have a free press. Now, a free press
I feel like it's a
emerging,
foundation.
it's the foundation of all freedoms. That's why even in the Constitution they talk about freedom of expression, including and that of the press, because you cannot express yourself freely when you don't have a channel through which you can express yourself, and that channel is usually the press. And so the challenge here is because of I want to call them hybrid states that we run in our continent. They have not yet matured at a level where they appreciate the role of the media in a democracy. If I don't understand why, if I am a president in a country where I know most of the intelligence reports probably might actually be just doctored, why wouldn't I invest in a strong media which I know probably will give me the true picture on the ground? And most people tend to run to the media when they fail, when the judiciary is not working, when the legislature is not giving them any way out. If the executive has closed everything out, usually the last result is always the media. And even those, the predators of the media themselves, the ones who actually harass media in this country and even elsewhere, when actually things turn against them, they run to the media for redress. Have you noticed that? Yes, it has happened. Absolutely. Here and elsewhere. So, partly, the first answer was that, and I maintain it, is that the failure to understand the role of the media partly because of the fragility of some of our democracies. Then, of course, the other one is that normally investigative journalism definitely usually is about the truth, and if the state does not want the truth to come out, definitely you'll clash. There's going to be a clash, and in most cases then that produces a chilling effect on media. And once you have a media that is timid, a media that is that goes about not unveiling certain things, certain issues, not breaking down certain issues, then you start experiencing signs of a failing democracy, a failing state, a failing governance system, and that is what in some of these African states is happening. But this is not to say, of course, that the media are saints. No, there are also bad apples within the media industry. Yes. But it is incumbent upon states, if you're talking about, and actually I want us to distinguish between governments and nation states. I think these two things are different. Even nation building, actually, government and nation building is actually two different things. And I agree with you when you say nation building must supersede, must transit. Oh, there it is. Indeed. What we're saying, infrastructure. Interesting. Is that the whole place, or this particular place?
Sometimes I think it's this place.
Now we thought we were being nice and we're giving them information and free advice.
Interesting. Of course, infrastructure, power, electricity is all about nation building.
It's the infrastructure generally.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
But at the church,
Tawali man, what's up?
Man, can you imagine people just dump everywhere? Someone drinks water and throws the bottle wherever.
Come on, Rogers. What else do you expect people to do with an empty bottle?
Simanya now, do you know that plastics take at least 450 years to decompose?
What? That's a long time.
Exactly, because plastics are made out of a lightweight and flexible material that doesn't decompose. And plastics everywhere in the environment cause plastic.
They rely on that.
What is plastic pollution now?
It is the accumulation of plastic waste in the environment, like bottles, polythene bags, straws. All of these contribute to plastic pollution.
I have been using them without knowing their effect.
Yeah, a lot of people have. Plastics are a danger to the ecosystem, both on land and in water.
So how can we overcome this problem? Is there something we can do?
Oh yes, we can reduce by minimizing the use of plastics.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Welcome back from that short, I don't know if I should call it a commercial break or whatever that was. We do apologize for that. There are things that sometimes are beyond our own capacity as individuals. Mr. Ochieno did talk earlier about failed infrastructure. This is one of the indicators. Electricity now and again does go. But again, we shall carry on, and we had the debate going and flowing very well. We're getting very good insights from these two gentlemen, and I don't want to waste any more minutes of them. And so I want to begin with you, Mr. Ochieno, and understanding the whole of, and he was speaking about, I'd asked him a question about investigative journalism and national security. as a firewall every time the government or states are being touched about a particular issue, especially mostly I think about corruption. They say you expose this, it's a matter of national security, you can't speak about that, you can't speak about that. I wanted to also get your perspective on side of this. How do you think we can do these investigations and strike a balance between the national security, make sure that the state is not bruised, but also the people or the perpetrators of those issues are not left scot-free?
No, the state is blackmailing the fourth estate. The fourth estate is a compulsory element of the state. Mm-hmm. The fourth estate as journalism is considered there as independent, as important, as critical to nation building, as the executive, as the legislature, as the judiciary. And so the fourth estate as the media, that absolutely is their role. All of them have absolute net responsibility. And as I said, the fourth estate, because they're, if you like, less political in that way, they're really the observers, they're really the mirrors. And in fact, the fourth estate are the friends of the citizens. The fourth estate are the ones who put a check on the executive, and particularly the executive and the legislature. But also they are the ones who are critically ensure that the judiciary perform. While the judiciary would be possibly the mediator arbiter between the executive and the legislature, the fourth estate are critical elements now, and they are the voices of the people. And that is why in any nation state where journalists are not able to act and practice, freely, that is a dead state. But also, I just want to say this, that earlier you, as part of Rugyendo's submissions, you were emphasizing investigative journalism. But like I said at the break, or indeed at the unfortunate, uncoordinated break, no, the journalist's average job, merely professional journalist, dealing with a story and reporting on a story, is doing investigative and research work. A journalist who goes to cover Joseph Ochieno's declaration as a candidate for president for, say, Uganda People's Congress or nation state at a major hotel at Kampala, beyond what Ochieno said, has got to ensure that they've got a background about Ochieno, and has got to make sure that beyond Ochieno, how many other candidates, for instance, were in UPC, and has got even to go back and look at records from Makerere University, including when Ochieno was last a guild president and what he did or did not do, things like that. And maybe if Ochieno states an element of an untruth, which is which, and you do the balance. And then you realize they're already doing that without the other alternative political parties making comments, or indeed Ochieno's other internal competitors. And the likely event that is about Ochieno versus Mr. Museveni, and Mr. Museveni dares say an untruth. He's checked actually on the podium that no, Mr. Museveni, no, Mr. President, you said it, but these are the facts. That really is what the fourth estate is. And then you realize that at that very particular level, we've not gone to any research laboratories. We've not gone to any PhD research rooms, as they would normally call them in major academic institutions, where actually the PhD rooms, or research rooms, postgraduate rooms, the equivalent of laboratories, because they're the charm, as Rugyendo talks about. So this takes things, as I normally again would say on some of these programs. You realize that I'm usually very unkind to anybody who's done a first degree, beyond a first degree. Anybody who's got a master's degree, and you know this, and has an ordinary conversation, or perhaps in this case take a conversation of national import, and then the submissions are such that away from evidence, there is no indication that this guy, particularly if a guy or lady, has gone through and got this degree without evidence that they've made a net contribution to new information. So at basic academic level, and I'm still calling merely master, because these days masters is a routine degree, the expectations is that if you're doing your proposal on a particular subject, a proposal at a master's level, yes, you're expected to see that I am doing this research on A, B, C, D, because I expect that there is a gap, on the how pollution impacts on the quality of living in Zambia. and then maybe your supervisor might say, could you be slightly much more specific, or could you be narrow it down? But however much you narrow it down, it must be one, as something new, but two, as something adding to knowledge. And if then that is the case, how then do nations run when, as I said, a minister comes and tables a proposal on PDM, and there is no evidence to suggest that this is what the projection that we've done? You know, interestingly, you talk about PDM as an example. It's possibly not surprising that Mr. Museveni has had many of these, there are 8 programs, Tandikwa and many of these other things, and many of them, and most of them have failed. Even this PDM thing is interesting, and I'm quite pleased that Makerere, they pushed it to Makerere, or at least to a university, to go ahead and carry it. That's actually good news. Now, part of that is we should be able to know, between this, what is the likely going to be the failure rates, what kind of errors this is going to happen, and then those are all the information that informed the decision making of government. But on the broader, as I said, the broader investigation, as you said, no, I don't know any matter of national security that an objective and independent and professional journalist like Ochieno Rugyendo here would go and found and not use his common sense that if I run this as a headline, it's going to go to ADF NRA kind of stuff, which is a threat to national security. Or if I establish that teenage mothers, part of the reasons for the numbers going high is ABCD. What information do I provide? Or maybe I'm going to get a population of now children beginning to get pregnant at 13. These are some of the ethical elements of this research, which are quite commonsensical. I don't actually know cases around the world where journalists have found information of national security, critical national security, and they put it in the headlines. So these are what they call partly self-censorship, as Rugyendo would say. No, I think in our nation, Uganda, the guys in charge don't like to be challenged, and they don't like alternative view. Unfortunately, that seems to be the case in Africa. But even to be fair also, even in established democracies where I also have some experiences, you find governments, including places like UK where I've got most experience, with massively free press, you find the governments also being very, very threatened in certain situations. But their threat is about the impact and implications if these things go into public opinion, partly because those countries and those governments care about public opinion.
Yes.
Public opinion matters,
Yes.
Yes. So if it's then about public opinion, you realize that, look, a prime minister, in this case, who's the most senior person, the president, taking a decision that will have been already very substantially formed. They know that, well, if we run with this, how is the country going to respond? What's the population going to respond? What is the impact on our electoral chances in the next year or two? Perhaps including local government elections, which is taking place in 3 months' time. So they take those considerations. So you realize that the more this topic becomes a matter of course nationally, the more we are upping the value. And we can say, Ochieno and Rugyendo, we have started. We are upping the value and possibilities of nation building. I think that, as I said again earlier, one of my biggest worries was finding a sense in certain sections of what I call mediocrity in journalism. And I normally get very frustrated whenever I am hosted in some programs, and then I find, and I'm saying this very openly, I find that there is a mismatch of information and positions in these cases. I feel that whoever the journalist is, you're betraying your role. And whoever the journalist is, in many cases, sometimes it might be that, well, you're playing me down, you're playing Rugyendo down, I'm not saying you. But basically, you're losing out, you're missing out your key role simply because the consumers of the information. And by the way, when you say television, don't you see, Rugyendo and I are really, we call celebrities. We're now celebrities. So it's extremely important that when we come here, we act responsibly. When we come here, whatever information we give and provide are able to be backed, solid and backed by evidence, but also responsible. And so the more these conversations are backed by academia, backed by independent research institutions, backed by civil servants in governments, and backed by, in this case, resources from the National Treasury. The last budget I was very critical about, I can't remember the figures, how much goes basically into research versus in some of the other areas, how much goes into science and technology. We can go on and on. How much basically, as I said, we're quarreling here that you cannot make a clear projection that there is going to be demand for extra public transport in Kampala, so what do you do? Or there's going to be extra burden on what are the guys who do the electricity, on Umeme, and then what do you do? You know, you can't sell power to Rwanda, and Rwanda does not have power cut, and you have power cut in Kampala. Not even in Nagongra, but in Kampala. What are you doing? What are we talking about? So this is extremely important. But just to conclude that question, it's blackmailing the fourth estate. But the fourth estate has really not helped itself. I don't know, and I'm now challenging yourselves, I actually don't know how many big journalists out there I respect enough. There are many, including you, I can count. I'm trying to say that, well, we need to begin to, Ugandans, to say that we have 30 journalists who will take a position and run with these things. They will challenge Ochieno as they will challenge Museveni, but they will do so on issues and on evidence. But of course, I also know that some newsrooms are backed and equipped by agents of the state, but just like there will be also supporters of opposition. But I felt very strongly that once upon a time, there used to be newsrooms, by then you were still young, that had people who were armed, for example. And so those really intimidated journalists. But I also want to say this, I think it's something just come in my spirit, you know me, I do God, that I've also known that there's some newsrooms, you know, that are stalked by friends of senior editors. And if these are things which are actually happening, maybe for friends and family, so that means we're not having people who are insufficiently professional. And so the fourth estate also really has a burden. If that's what we're doing, we are not we don't have the authority to criticize the government or other people as far as the business of nation building is concerned.
Thank you so much. Now, on that very topic, actually, of information and legitimacy, I want to ask him, especially now that you're building research-based media. You want to share information from a researched background. That's a very interesting thing. But you also understand how we are now in a generation of citizen journalism. Everyone gets an information and runs it and shares it the way they find. And most of the times, credibility is not really checked. And so it can easily be consumed. So in this generation, how do you think that we can still get that which it was back in their day, the professionalism, the legitimacy of the media, and even the research itself? Because it's easy for someone to also fabricate research and put out whatever it is. Because, I mean, it's citizen journalism, everyone is allowed to put out anything.
Yes, I think, well, I don't think even it's just media alone that really faces that kind of crisis. Deep fake is everywhere, in every profession. Even the internet itself has some deep fakes. Yes. So I think what normally stands out is professionalism. What stands out is quality, is evidence. And I think, and I'm glad when you talk about if there can be a situation where we can have the top 30 journalists and we know when these speak, then we've got to follow, we've got to take a second look. So I think, yes, technology has really disrupted industries everywhere, in the media inclusive, and for the media, actually, it's really turned everyone into a journalist, a potential journalist. As long as you have information, you just throw it out there. Yes. But you see, ultimately, the point is what information, who says what, and what kind of information is that can be credible enough and people will believe it. So I think the savior, the catch point there is the quality of information, is the nature of information that is being churned out there. Even on social media, if you were to go there, you always find actually serious journalists that have taken over the space, and we always churn out good stuff. And really, usually it's up to the population to decipher and say and know who is saying what and who is saying the truth. And of course, the danger has been that social media or digital media being so fast, there's a danger of people trusting information that quick, and especially when they were not sophisticated. But it all goes back to the entire society, really, how we perceive certain things. And are we a society that reads, for example? Are we a society that is able to tell just from the face of it, to say, but this can't be credible? People will always want to take everything at face value, especially when they are too lazy to know, or to really take an extra look, or to go and really counter information. Are we that kind of society that loves to do that, or we just want to take everything the way it comes, just like you read the Bible and you don't have to question? So it is. I think generally we live in a broken kind of society, kind of world where people don't take time to research, to read beyond what is seen.
There's no depth in it.
They not be able to also, detect depth in anything. That's what happens, and that explains the growth of citizen journalism. And citizen journalism actually is not necessarily bad, by the way. I'll give you an example. Recently, you remember the incident at the Entebbe airport, and that led to serious changes. That was good, positive citizen journalism at work. Somebody was
even I think the recent NGO exhibition.
Yes, that kind of thing. Even the porthole exhibition.
Porthole, yes, which is still
ongoing. That's citizen journalism. Citizen journalism is not necessarily bad. It is how you use it that turns out to be. But even good journalism, not just good journalism, but even the traditional press. It's all about professionalism. If a profession is infiltrated by deep fakes, even you have quack doctors, you have quack journalists, you have quack citizen journalists, you even have quack politicians. You've heard of situations like, you've heard of course, we've talked about ghost hospitals, but also you've had ghost districts. Somebody went and created a district.
By the way, I initially couldn't believe that.
It's the northern part of your village. The other day I was telling Charles Onyango boy, by the way, are you aware that in the northeastern part of your village there was a fake district there? And he laughed. With the NRDC, with the cow, with the everything, we have ghost soldiers, we have ghost everything everywhere. It gets back to nation building. It gets back to the nation narrative that we have. What is our narrative? What is that brings us together, that we all believe in, despite our religions, despite our political beliefs? What is that really brings us together, that makes us believe that this is the only way we can build our nation? And when that doesn't happen, and you allow everyone to just think their own way and project themselves in a manner that they think this is the best way to go, then you have a chaotic situation, and systems break down. People don't take care about quality because what they believe in is quantity, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that creates situations, bad situations in every industry, including the media.
Can I just say something? It's a slight paragraph from my memoirs.
Yes.
But it's interesting contrast, but it's really about professional journalism versus nation states in established nations. There was a story about racism in South London, where a black boy was killed when he was coming from a library, ironically, and the boy was of Nigerian descent, and the killers were suspected to be from African Caribbean. So these are all African kids, but one from mainland and the other one from the diaspora Africa. And of course, the police have mishandled it, and then stories about race and racism and inequality and things like that. Quick thing, the big Sunday paper, Sunday Times, carried out investigations, and it was supposed to release a big story. Now, this thing leaked to the area MP, who was a big person in government, and a friend.
To the media.
A friend. This lady called me and said, Joseph, you know what? the Sunday Times is about to do this story, and she was now looking at the impact, one, on the local council, race relations, some of the underlying issues about inequalities and what government has or has not done. Now, the story then was going to bring out educational performances, level of unemployment in particular equivalent of, say, Kampala City Council. What the is and not, and then the failures of local government, the failures of the governing political party. It became a big issue. But now, two things why I bring this. One, it's interesting. This is an established democracy. The governing political party is a progressive political party, but they did not have the information, and this intelligence police working, they didn't have the information that the Sunday paper had.
Yes.
So these guys went ahead and did. So that's what I'm trying to say, complementary, complementary roles. So they didn't have that information. But most importantly, the reaction from government was, meaning governing political party, meaning the state, government and state. It was one, the impact was going to have on race relations, but two, the political impact that the political party in power and the political party governing that Kampala City Council equivalent was going to have. They reacted, they responded. Now, you're not going to ask me that I went on to fudge, but no, we went on then to manage, and our role as African leaders was to manage the race relations issue between, because it was going to come out like Nigerians versus the other. And it could easily then go ahead
and implode within the
community,
African community itself.
And this is the Mzungu person, but it was not in our interest as African people. So we emerged then as leaders, African leaders emerged, mainstream British political leaders emerged, religious leaders emerged, and and we managed it well. But at that stage, it was not about a blame about anybody, anything, but
it was about the governance.
The realities. Yes, and it compelled the central government to react, to respond. I can tell you with absolute pleasure that some of the regeneration, and I hope some of our viewers get, when we talk about regeneration, how the regeneration of some of these quality spaces which have taken place today are multi-billion pound stuff, for which I'm extremely proud. I have told maybe part of this program that recently I was in London last year and I was being asked, this Joseph, the member of parliament is retiring. I got, in part is part of that. Now that is when democracy works. That's when communities work. And that's
complementarity between the forest state
and that is when institutions and systems work. No, these things are good. No, we get raw deals on this continent. The fourth estate is extremely important. The fourth estate is not only important, but they're complementary, and their roles should be beefed up, enabled, and actually not reduced. And finally, the citizens ought to know the power of the fourth estate, the power of the legislative assembly, the power of the judiciary, and of course the power of this executive. The executive, because they seem to come from the top and present it that way, the ordinary citizens seem not to have as much direct power and influence of them. But of course, that is in cases where election results are almost like foregone conclusion. But generally, the citizens should have. Because I said in these countries, and in normal cases, the executive, the presidency will be extremely concerned about public opinion. And the managers and the enablers of public opinion are fourth estate. And when that happens, surely nations will
start building.
And I'm very glad you did talk about that. The media generally shapes perspectives and opinion.
They should.
And there's this thing, which is a very common virus, the misinformation and the disinformation. Now, just to put a perspective, misinformation is that someone shares information in ignorance of the authenticity. Disinformation is like someone engineers, in other words, makes a fact that is not actually there. So in this whole trying to shape perspectives and opinions, how do you think the media organizations and us, of course, now back to the research, how do you think we can, media organizations can control that and make sure that what goes out is that which the society does need to do, even in the midst of citizen journalism, that we have that right information?
No, I think the burden of responsibility now rises higher for editors, and Rugyendo is an editor. I just don't know how much newsrooms today, editors take this seriously. Again, I'll tell you that I know editors and I know senior reporters and the new senior producers. I'm not quite sure how much they know. I'll just give an example of a television network in this country where I met a fantastic presenter who was also a senior producer of a particular program. And I just use my case to make it simple. The UPC case that sometimes Rogers and I quarrel over here. And this individual genuinely did not know of what is going on in UPC. This individual did not know. That's a very commonsensical thing. It was covered, maybe even their own network covered it. You know, they did not know that the Court of Appeal ruled against the Canada. Uganda Post Congress, people can go and do whatever they want to do. But it's the oldest political party in this country, the only political party that governs whatever countries. The party that, but then my point is, you don't know the status of Uganda People's Congress. No, by the editors, I'm challenging you on this. Because it appears it is still the problem, that you don't know the state. But Court of Appeal ruled. So you guys, you cannot read a 4-page ruling, and stick with it. Now, when your presenters or producers are going to release event, if you say a television program, so where are the editors?
The research, where the research.
Where's the point of the research? We could write as a news in a newspaper, or maybe even if or a news report. Where are the editors? Where are the middle people? Where are the sub-heads? How much do they know about this? And so some of these are basic. There shouldn't really be problem. But it's the more reason, you're absolutely right, why editors should be up and alert. I have had cases where I've had to ring news networks. And sometimes people think you're ringing to complain and coerce them towards your direction. But I simply said, no, it's your responsibility to inform, because it actually generally matters. I think then misinformation, when you then come to us political parties, for example, because many of the things will pretend to be political. I don't know, thankfully, I'm very lucky because I'm UPC, and I'm also very lucky that I'm UPC president, and I'm also lucky that I'm building a fantastic young team, of people, including today, the young person I met before I came into this program is a young person who's 28, and I tell them that I don't do lies, So the point is, you cannot run with me in Uganda People's Congress and you become my spokesperson, information officer, whatever kind of stuff, and you can chant some funny thing in Tungamo just because you want to try and please a group of 10, 30 potential members of Uganda. You've got to tell the truth. So this is actually not for the fourth estate. This is a responsibility from our point of view, but also because I know
for every season of change,
there is implications for me giving you this information. But also at the end of the day, that now brings me back to Editor Rugyendo, that I know as President Ochieno, if I issue a statement or make a comment or something that I cannot back, Rugyendo will hold me to account. And if Rugyendo holds me to account, he'll splash it as a headline on this paper. It's got an implication. Now, the more we do that,
the more we become better.
The more we become better. And you know what? When political leaders know that when there's implication for everything else that they do, and at least you, the citizens, that once you know there is that liar, dubious former minister, whatever has done that thing, he or she is going to pay for it at the ballot. Do you know what? These guys will think twice. And that's one of the things that we need. So partly there's impunity, but partly because there's an absence of this conversation. And that's why I want to say that, what date is it today?
Today.
28th of which month?
Of August.
August 2023, 28th. We've had this conversation. May it be the beginning of upping and upping and upping this conversation, because we may just about be building a new special ministry of planning and economic development called nation-state building.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Mr.
So,
Rugyendo,
yes.
and I wanted you to add a bit about that one. You did talk about the in-depth reporting, fact-based reporting, research again. And we also have sensationalism, and which again sometimes can come with the misinformation, disinformation, and people trying to put out something in a sensational way, which is a thing, by the way, that is common with the media these days. Do you think we can avoid these pitfalls as the media foundations and organizations? And how do you think we can maneuver that and make sure that we have the information? Well, sensationalism, if it's a fact, that's a given. But how do we draw this balance now?
I think it's become difficult to actually strike a balance for two reasons. One, commercialization has also become a challenge in terms of maintaining professionalism within the media houses. Reason being that media houses are no longer they no longer appear in the fashion of service industries that serve a cause. They're now companies who have to pay tax, they have salaries, they have different things. So there's no difference between a media house, a private media house in Uganda and an actual factory, in this country. And so, but that doesn't mean then that what you produce doesn't follow certain ethical guidelines and stuff. So what has happened is that then, apart from the commercialization, that now forces media houses to compete, to run, to ensure that they have, first of all, the pressures are too much. You have social media, you have citizen journalists also churning out information, but you also have your fellow competitors within the industry where you're competing to out the first story, and which is, in my view, actually lazy journalism, because I think sometimes if 30 or 50 online publications have said the same story, Museveni and his wife have celebrated 50 years of marriage, so it's not possible that every one person in Uganda will read all the 5 or the 50 outlets. I think the point is that journalists then have to begin to think about nuance, how to tweak stories, take time, and then come up with well researched, well backed up stories to be able to look different, which is what I'm trying to do, by the way, by being different. But I'm trying to give you the background. I think the sort of cause is that commercialization, and that now breeds competition, and then with competition, then you have people churning out whatever they want to see because they want to be the first to break the story. That is the other problem. The second one is that, generally speaking, I think training standards have gone down I think across our schools, because anybody who is able to speak on a microphone and become a presenter at a radio station or TV, all of a sudden they start calling themselves journalists, and all of a sudden they are the producers, all of a sudden they are, and that's it. And then, of course, why do we have those kinds of people coming into the industry? Largely because the industry doesn't pay. We live in a purely capitalist dispensation where labor really has to be paid, and so you have less people now who want to sacrifice for the industry for a cause, to be able to say no, we are nation building, even if we're not earning a lot, we still have to keep going. But you see, you are running a media house. I have run one before. Running a media house, and you have too many journalists, salespeople who all want to be paid. So what are you going to do? So sometimes these pressures are also sometimes a problem, and so they tend to attract. So media houses will tend to attract less professional or less qualified people to do the job that the channels of this world would be doing, but at an astronomical figure. To employ a person like Ochieno as an editor for me, I have to fork out about 20 million plus. And so,
I'll be very generous. I'm a nation builder.
Absolutely, yes. There's a few of you, but that's the problem. That's one of the challenges that these media houses are facing. And so they're attracting untrained people, and most of the people are well trained. They end up in public relations. They end up as public relations, government spokespersons, because that's where the money is. They want to survive, and so the industry increasingly is becoming devoid of is in a huge deficit actually of well trained people, and that causes what you are trying to say here. Sensationalism, or trying to bring out stories that don't match up to the standard, because people are rushing, or people want to outdo each other, and it's all a chaos. And secondly, thirdly, we don't have a professional body that is very active, and this is in the constitution, by the way. The state is supposed to really enforce some of these institutions. Like the National Institute of Journalists of Uganda is a state organ, but it's totally out of nowhere, and so the state does not actually has no hand in terms of regulating journalism in this country really effectively, and so they've let it be because and if you let a profession of this nature to the market forces, then you have a challenge. The lawyers have succeeded, the medical people have succeeded, but journalism, no. For reasons that I don't understand, but maybe partly technology, commercial interests, commercial imperatives, and poor training.
I just want to say that perhaps being unfair to you guys, that maybe at the beginning, particularly of the coming of NRM, that possibly there was slightly much excitement, and perhaps the organization, the media, allowed itself to be absorbed.
Absolutely.
Because I also know that most of the journalists at the time moved away from professional journalism to acquire mastering for NRM. And I think in part we are paying for that. But I want to say to you, and that's a very serious point, to the extent, therefore, that the 20 numbers I was talking about, you realize that's a very difficult number to get.
Very
and as
difficult.
I said, when I returned, yeah, so when I returned here, 20, I found the void, but of course at the same good enough, because an area of my interest into my politics and also media, that I was following events in Uganda, and I could not count on many serious friends in the media. But of course, you're many, you're many, I must say. But clearly, I don't think we can say that we managed to build numbers and professional staff. But beyond that, actually, we talk capitalism. I agree with you, but only to an extent. I think looking at other nations, talking sensationalism, it possibly is the case that if there is professionalism and if we deal with some of the underlying issues, including poor pay in the media, and then we talk about sensible regulation, and again, interesting, you talk about that and the existence of professional bodies, and one of the things I want to do is to be able to influence trade unionism in all sectors. I want to, because it's actually supposed to be, it's not supposed to be a negative thing.
Of course,
but it's not supposed to be trouble causing.
The perception here is that
it's so thing. If we were to do that in the media, also in terms of regulations and making sure that we take care of these professionals, they will emerge. But it is possible actually for 5 newspapers, for example, 5 media houses to actively compete. I think particularly for the print media, for example, as Rugyendo was given, there is nothing specifically difficult with us actually having a publication for a particular consumer audience, which are saying these are perhaps higher level professionals, guys who read predominantly Sunday papers. Are they very much about economics? Are they people who read left leaning? And when I normally talk about these things, it gets very important for nation building that we need to begin to move to the politics of ideas, and politics of ideas will then move to more also about politics of ideology, and therefore, when we look at newspapers, is the independent to the left, or is the observer
right,
to the running of politics? In Britain, I naturally read The Guardian, partly because it was left-leaning, but partly when I read all the papers, particularly on Sundays, UPC, you took the Independent, the Sunday Times, I'm talking about Sunday, and the Guardian did not run on Saturday papers on the weekend, but so bulky that you'll have material to take you through the thing. And then, of course, you can call the softer papers like the Daily Mirror, which is basically a labor-leaning left paper, the Daily Mail, and the others, which are basically right-wing. They have their own stories, but they do sensational stuff, but competing amongst themselves as tabloid in a particular way. But in terms of consumption, these papers, these publications know their audiences. So the same you go with television. It's still possible to run these things professionally, with the limitations, with organized internal self-regulation, professional regulations, and journalists who are responsible. And this is an important one, that if there is a young average journalist at Digitalk who is doing his or her job, they want to grow, and they look at Rugyendo as their role model, and they want to grow to Rugyendo and retire like Ochieno as organized commentators based on some of the reasonable 30, 40 years experience. It's common sense that this young lady ought to know that, well, in order for me to transition through Rugyendo to reach retirement of the Ochienos, I will have to do good stuff.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, which story did I break and how? How did it run? And which story was I pulled on by the editors, and which story caused my news, my media house problems with the Communications Commission. And then finally talk about Communications Commission. I think this Communications Commission here, I don't know who the boss is, I want to visit them for tea. Because they're extremely important and they should stop becoming an agent for a particular political organization, but rather enablers of the broader media. And if they're able to do that, I think, we will be somewhere building on the 28th of August.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to you about this particular point, but I wanted him to first give an opinion. We have a general thing, like thinking, which is, I don't think it's unique to Uganda itself, sometimes even outside. But when you talk about government-sponsored research, some people feel like at the back of the mind there is some political agenda, there's some interest, personal interest that is going to trying to be put across. Is that a problem now of the community? Is it a problem of government? What is the problem here, and how do we cure that kind of?
I think research is research, in my view. Well, normally, once a research project is undertaken, in most cases, of course, and the report is done, researchers will always say, we always mention at the end of the products who funded them and this. And usually with funding, definitely come with interests. And there's nothing wrong with government funding research. In most cases, actually, I think they want to get to a true story. They want to get to the bottom of the matter. I don't find it a problem that government has funded research and therefore its consumption will have issues. Usually, there's no research that is an end in itself. Usually, research will always open up windows of further research, windows of contestation, especially at the level of dissemination, there's nobody that is stopped, especially in the academic world, from critiquing a research product. So I think I don't really find a problem with that. And I think a government embracing a culture of research is actually a very good thing. It's an indication of wanting to grow and be better, but also to craft policy based on evidence. If it's on sponsored evidence, there's nothing wrong with that, because that way, the state or the government that engages in any research project or is actually trying to emphasize and create an environment of research culture. So therefore, that then even ordinary researchers like Ochieno can come up and challenge it, and there's no problem with it. The challenge is when a government runs policy on simple political pronouncements.
Rumors and emotions.
You're here, people want a district, you say, okay, I'll give it to you just because you want a vote, not because you've done a proper ethnographical research about whether indeed such a district is needed culturally, but also that you've carried out a survey to see whether it's viable in terms of output, in terms of
and then beyond
self-sustenance.
The implications long term.
In terms
of broader impact.
You must be able to say, if my village has asked, Bongera has asked for a district, so we need to understand in terms of political projection, that's fine. We be able to think about it, that's fine. You can assess it along those lines, but also assess it along other lines, economic viability, sustainability, self-sustenance, and cultural issues that also come in. But also importantly, the idea is always about whether indeed these units, our respective units, are viable even in the long term. So, but we don't see that, especially when it comes to the way we run things here.
The big things, yeah.
It's always, once somebody has pronounced themselves politically, that's it. It means this district works until things now turn around and we realize probably we should have listened to researchers.
I've actually got a small story to back up onto that. Apparently, Old Milton, it is said, because I didn't experience this, that both in the 60s and even 80s governments, that whenever there are big issues, in fact, I want to say much, whenever there are big issues, beyond, when guys sit around cabinet, in the notorious ones where Rwakasisi and Kirunda, because these are the loudest guys in Obote government. And I'm told, so every time, if it is something from a particular ministry, if the ministers to present these things on cabinet, remember, to present on cabinet would have gone through through the civil service. So by the department, the technocrats will have dealt, and then you bring politically, but really it has gone through the process.
Yes.
So guys would debate and guys would argue before matters go past cabinet. I don't know whether that's what's going on these days. But apparently also it used to, I'm told, Obote with his usual suspect boys, and maybe a girl or two, the days possibly boys, predominantly a girl, would retreat to his home with the minister concerned. And normally what would happen, poor Mama Miria would sort out the supper and the drinks of the day. And so, usually, that's when the stories about the Mutabiles will tell the stories, So they get, student leaders. So guys from maybe the student guild, in the students' union, and a professor also, Mujaja Kikis of this world, they would come. So now this informed, you see what I'm trying to say? So meaning by the time this thing becomes this public thing, it has gone through a process of real testing. Now this is simplistic political evidence to build what Rugyendo is saying, but you can actually see that there, you know the likelihood of getting it wrong.
It's very minimal.
It's minimized. And so some of these are commonsensical things. But partly because I'm lucky that this is my tradition, maybe it rubs onto me even if I was never there. And when I look across the continent, and as you two know, as you're saying, I have, particularly in the last 20 years, got involved in commentaries and analysis and covering Africa at different spaces. And sometimes big stories come out of global media and on global stage, and there's something about Nigeria, and say, Africa, are we cast? So what is it? So some of them are quite clear, basic, common sense things. So no, this we are talking Uganda, but no, this is an African problem that we need to very urgently work on. And I gave that example simply because I hope maybe somebody takes a cue and run with it, whether it's here in Uganda or elsewhere.
There's this one, I think it's more related also to that one. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us and for following. This one says, Mr. Ochieno, in the era of data-driven decision-making, what safeguards are necessary to ensure that research findings are not misused or misinterpreted for political gains?
Well, it depends on what information it is. And as I say, intellectuals, knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted.
Absolutely.
So really, if information has gone through, as already said, with evidence-based, information, and they put it on the table, why would you get scared off from another political thing? Don't you see how I normally taunt NRA that they pull our UPC things, but they're not able to deliver because they're borrowed shots? So no. And then on the other hand, even after pushing that political point against NRA, it is again back to me as a burden of responsibility. That's what I know. That's why I'm on this program. And that's why, predominantly, by that, I go out on the media quite a lot. Some of the reason that I go to the media, by the way, and I'll say this again today. Sometimes I'm genuinely very tired because I'm very, very busy and I do many, many things. And many of them are very voluntary things. And of course, that's the work of a revolution. Everything is the only one, But sometimes I feel that it's my responsibility to go and share. And it's my responsibility to go and release, as the men and women of the cloth would say. No. The more we have information profilation, the more it is relatively easier also actually for serious information that would concern politics, concern security, concern development. The easier it is to counter-check and balance. But finally, most established research anyway, in academic research, and here if you talk about both academic and indeed some professional researches, you don't go through without it being authorized or cleared in many cases by senior people, you know. And of course, if you hear the research content we're talking about, it maybe at a professional academic level, a professor will have to go through the ethical things and everything, including making sure that you're okay in the field and you're not being out of touch and with the realities, or perhaps being a threat, both in terms of the name and integrity of the institution, the field in question, yourself, and the communities with whom and with which you engage. But of course everything else will have risks. But by and large, no. I think we are better today, you know, and should be in a better position today. And it should be more unacceptable today to have half-baked information put on table by government or by any public organization. And that is why also maybe one of the things we need to begin talking about, people hardly talk about. You know, when I saw this, very interesting, there's been an increase on fuel, on the pump.
Yes.
You know, and we've not had a conversation about why the sudden rise. Is it about the issue of the shilling? Is it about the World Bank threat? Is it about the other war in Ukraine? And nobody by the Rugyendo talked about these things. The media hasn't come out to pick some of the things that I normally whenever I come out, I don't make big, deliberately bring out some breaking news stories that you hope you raise it and somebody could pick and run with. I normally say some of the things that I talk about. Guys in government sometimes run with it. You can see it 5-6 months later, and then you sense that maybe somebody didn't listen to run with it. But in many cases, to serve their interests rather than to make change and cause things better. What I'm saying here is, when is it, as Rugyendo was saying, because we want to bring it home in a much more simplistic way, that actually, you know, maybe one of the major publications, Rugyendo's publication, runs a headline to say that, well, did you know? Of course, once in a while these things are put in the papers, but they put in those round circles rather than in the manner in which the public are able to consume. That how much is average fuel, you know, from when it leaves Kuwait? How much is it at Mombasa? When it reaches Kampala? How much are these guys who are, you know, who own petrol stations? Yes. What differences do they make? And how much does government take as tax? At the end of the day, why are we at the end of the day paying 5,000 shillings at the pump? What are the differences? You can do that with that. You can do that with Uber. You can do that with data. You know, you can do that with saying why the usual. We are not giving them adverts. The MTN and Airtels of this world. You know, why are they charging so much and what profit? You know, some of those things. These are the kind of things we're trying to talk about. Because at the end of the day, when MTN eats my 2,000 shillings when it should be eating 1,000 shillings, it's making me 1,000 shillings poorer. But it's also meaning that, well, my spend capacity, including at a local supermarket, you know, is less. But it also means that maybe I'm 1,000 shillings less capable of supporting my community in a particular project. But then finally on this, the more we do these things, the more we've not even talked about some of the other ones. You know, we might be talking statistics and figures. What about environment? Kampala is the most polluted capital city in Africa. Where is the conversation? Has anybody picked where the I've got a good friend who's a senior science journalist. She's now going to consulting, by the way. She's beautiful. I love her in a good way. We've been good friends for a long time. What are they trying to do to tell the rest of the world implications in our heart, the burdens of responsibility in terms of health service and provision, things like that? This is what we talk about when we talk about research and nation building. And if it's doing like that, how much of that is eating into the health budget and a health budget which is already struggling?
I actually like that question. But
we have a few questions. If you could.
Sorry.
I just want to make a conclusion that take a particular data-driven environment that we're in right now. I think he's right to answer the question because you see, if you look at why contemporary states fail, is because they don't want to respond from data, you know, to respond with data-driven policy. In other words, so and I was asking, how do we ensure that politically that doesn't cause problems?
Yes.
But you see, either way, if you because data has come, data is available, technology has made sure that data is available everywhere and can be actually churned out. The other day I was attending a workshop on data visualization, I think 2 days back, and I noticed that even those who are engaged in data visualization are able, do not want to wait for states to be able to understand, to be able to know that some people are breaking out this data. The most important thing right now is that either way, data can be disseminated, through the different channels, media and anywhere else, and so therefore states have to respond. And even now we've begun to see actually different states, including this state, trying to respond to facts, because if where facts overwhelm emotions, or facts overwhelm propaganda, there's no way you can have a political situation. You cannot have a political backlash. It's not possible because the data is available. Data has been available to everyone else, so you can only respond by responding. You can only respond using or via data-driven policy making.
But that's actually interesting. Sorry, we're seeing all that question, but
yes.
Just a quick thing. That is back to the person asking the question. That's actually very important. Yeah. So the burden of responsibility now is in the states to ensure that essential, appropriate information is disseminated to the citizenry, appropriately, responsibly, properly, and in this case, professionally. The more reason why they should create enabling spaces for these things to happen.
Mr. Rugyendo, this one asks, Mr. Rugyendo, research often requires time and resources.
Absolutely.
Which might not align with the fast-paced nature of media reporting.
Absolutely.
How can these two entities collaborate effectively despite these differences?
Well, I think, first of all, media don't have to engage in deep research. They can engage in basic research to people to back up their stories. But also, then ultimately go over those stories and then now take time to be able to engage in deep research. Yes, I agree. Sometimes that we don't all have to wait until we all have this story. And sometimes we don't have to start at the same time. We may not be investigating the same phenomenon. But at the same time, because media environments are fast-paced, depending on the character of a given media house, so sometimes certain stories just require actually basic research, basic knowledge, basic one or two questions here and there, and you have a few facts there to be able to counter official positions. So I don't think there's a problem there. The two can merge in terms of one, certain sections of the publication, for example, can concentrate on basic research, but also later on, when you go deep down into the features, into the analysis, you can take your time. Yes, it is resource demanding, but I can assure you that I think the problem has been a disconnect between media and researchers who are already engaged in this, and it's ongoing. There are so many researchers in all these institutions and research firms with so much information, and they don't know where to put it. So the challenge has been the failure by media houses to create that connection, because the information is available. I have found it in many cases.
But in a way, that's what I was saying at the beginning, that the media's job are the conduits for dissemination.
Absolutely.
So in many of these cases,
create a conduit.
The media's job are not necessarily actually as researchers.
Yes.
In many of these cases, it's simply about linking with the academic research institution in question, or scientific research institutions in the spaces, perhaps government laboratories in spaces, or perhaps government scientists or statisticians in the spaces. And that's where sometimes some of the issues that whether or not these organizations release information. And responsible media will go ahead and say, we did this, we've been following for the last several months, this is what we've got and this is what we don't have. Or perhaps the organization in question felt ABCD was too sensitive to release, this is where they are. We wait for maybe the next 8 months, we will be in a particular state. You are still being responsible.
Absolutely.
And lastly, this one says, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, given our low research culture, is there potential risks of over-reliance on foreign-funded research initiatives? And how can we bolster our indigenous research capacity? And that is the final one, as you conclude.
That's very clever, indeed. No, they are. And actually, talk about research, I think Rugyendo hinted on it earlier, that research is another thing. The research is suggested, it's one of the debates in academia particularly, that they will usually rarely not be 100% objective because they will always lean towards the people who are commissioned them. So it's neither here nor there. But that said, actually, it's actually very dangerous for us to depend on foreign researchers.
Absolutely.
One of the things why Mr. Museveni thinks the oil belongs to him is because we had a very careful, this breaking news, we had a very careful way in which we were able to manage some of our natural resources, including oil. And that's the statement in the military report state at the time, including seeking to train people in this area, to train people without people knowing. One of the reasons why some of these things are happening. So you can manage some of these things, particularly when you want to do it and you're doing these things indigenously. No, the answer is no. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in research. We need to invest in our own basic infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we don't talk about some of these failed roads. When we talk about holistic infrastructure, including industry, we need to revamp our industrial areas. I was talking to a friend earlier today whose father was a former minister, not of UPC, but they talk about some of the farms that their late parents had in Uganda, and it's very impressive over nearly 30 or so years ago. But these guys already had small to medium scale industries, and when you look into it, the work around it must have been research-based, it must have been also substantially scientific, and of course, at the end of the day, some of these things were neither here nor there. These are things that we need to revive, we need to revamp, but most importantly, we need to begin to critique national budgets much more. That while we are funding, we're putting so much on security, putting so much on defense, how much we're putting in education, how much we're putting in research, how much we're putting in industry. We've not even talked about the issue to do with the environment, so therefore question to do with climate change. Some of the climate change things are substantial research-based, but are things that we also need to be very critical about, and the media needs to be have to be very important players into this if we are to sensitize, and I don't like some of the other words, the citizens, on many of these things, create national awareness, because these are national crisis things for which people think they're political. But as I said, we see some of our political leaders, they seem to have no clue. When we criticize them going on the road of 50 cars, and they don't know how much they're emitting out. And when we tell them that, well, some leaders in other developed countries ride bicycles rather than, oozing cars. These are not debates which are not being had in Africa. We urgently need to be having these
Actually, what's going on now happening in academia right now? There is those conversations are beginning, but there are debates actually about the north and south. That there's so much research actually that goes on in the north, and it's the north actually that funds research in the south. But importantly, I think this can only be stopped or
shaped. For avoidance of that, you made global north.
Absolutely. Okay, global north, okay. Absolutely. Not northern Uganda. Absolutely. Global north and the global south, yes. Because actually, I can give you some bad news. 70% of the research done in Africa is done by foreigners.
That's correct.
And also, and a big part of that research actually done in South Africa. So you can imagine, in terms of contribution to research, to global research by the global south, is very, very minimal. And the reason is a political reason, because I think...
Is it deliberate?
No, because I think the global south actually are not interested in funding research. That's the whole point. And the global north is progressing, is generating new technologies, new innovations. You noticed how it took just a few weeks for the global north to produce a vaccine.
That's correct.
Here we are still struggling. Why? It's just basically basic funding. Political. It needs to take a political will, a deliberate political move to fund research over and above everything else, to be able to build new economies. If you're talking about pathogen economies, for example, if you're talking about knowledge economies, most of these countries in the global north actually are knowledge economies. They don't have these resources. We have more resources, but we cannot research and turn these resources into products, into value, largely because we lack research. And why don't we research it? Because we cannot fund research. Research is very expensive, and I agree with the first person who was talking about funding research. But it's going to take a deliberate political action to fund research. Or situations like now we're going to have oil in the next maybe few years, And if that happens, we need to agree that really huge proceeds out of this oil must be invested in serious scientific research that produces, products and that don't have to rely on the knowledge of the global north to be able to liberate ourselves. So you realize that actually research is the way to go now. It's now no longer about going to the bush and you fight and you take over governments and then that's a political revolution, and then that you have transformed the society. You cannot transform society, I can assure you, if you don't invest in scientific research. And scientific research is also about independence. Yes, it's about independence. So yes, because if much of our research is funded by outsiders, then how do you talk about African independence?
Yeah.
If much of the research is, if much of the products we consume are products produced by foreign research, then we're not talking about independence.
Yes.
So I think governments need to begin to go beyond what they think are the actual ideologues of their different movements. It's not about people who go to Chankwanzi and then you think these are the only ones that have a correct ideology. The people who have the right ideology are the ones that actually are going to use their brains to create products that liberate countries. And states must be deliberate about supporting these kinds of people. But what is happening around these countries in the global south? What happens? You see, how do they recognize, for example, performance in terms of intellectual debate, intellectual products? Zero. How do they recognize their process? Who gets front page recognition in these newspapers? Yes. It is the thieves, it's the political thieves, it's the political actors. Who gets recognized at events? If it's not the speaker, the president, the vice president, also the RDCs, you hear them say these things.
And on funny issues.
Nobody will ever mention about we have our scientist here called Professor Gwang is also around and is in the audience. They will never the one who discovered the COVID. They will never say anything like that. But a cow who has stolen PDM money will get more recognition. And this is the kind of message we are passing down to our children, that actually it is worthless to waste a lot of time in school. It pays easier, it pays quicker, when you're fresh from university and you start political agitating and you're in parliament and you're appropriating yourself all the money. And that's it. Financial engineering is the innovation now in the global south. And that has to stop. It can only stop if states that want to nation build start giving prominence to intellectualism, giving prominence to research, giving prominence to science and technology.
Okay. And so therefore, putting a specific bulk part of the national budget on education.
Absolutely.
Education as the biggest and the broadest, as a foundation.
Absolutely.
And so you begin, as Rugyendo is saying, that it becomes cool to be a brain.
Thank you very much. What's the biggest resource that these people rely on? It's the human brain. These places. Even God, when he was creating, we don't know which resources he was using. He would say, okay, let there be this. What was this? It was his intellectualism that created some of these things. So ultimately, oil goes, your politics will go, but the human beings, the humanity stays. So the best resource that you can actually invest in is the human being, is the intellectual capacity of your citizens to create things, to turn around things, to build knowledge economies. And this is not what is happening in some of these states.
But can I just conclude, because I know you're rushing. Can I just say this in conclusion? No, research is expensive, as Rugyendo says.
Absolutely.
But you know what? It's actually not very expensive for governments. And Global North invests in this, and sometimes when they come and then they fund even some of our own researchers and give them monies, and the monies look big. No, these guys know what they get out of it.
Absolutely.
Research is the information, is everything else, and that's what we're trying to say that, well, we need to begin to it's part of actually strategic national security, and it's part of strategic African national security. So really, Africa needs to wake up, begin to invest from the earliest level of education, in building capacity for our people, making them thinkers and innovators and inventors, but also then making them inquisitive as the other doctor that says, why injecting my left leg when my right leg is the one which has been injured. So we need to do that. It needs to be proactive. We need to be deliberate. And as I said, governments can afford to do this we need to start somewhere anyway. As I said, it started early part of our independence. There's no reason why we're not able to do some of these things today. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I don't think I have anything useful to add as an individual. I think they have exhausted the idea. They did agree that research is expensive, but I do think that
it's necessary.
It's an imperative.
It's an imperative.
Ignorance is even more expensive.
Absolutely. Try ignorance.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, and folks who have been watching and following. Thank you so much for being with us. Of course, it's the reason why we come here every Monday evening to make sure that we learn a thing or two. A building of a nation, like we're talking today, is not a thing of one single man, it's a thing of a collective. And so we come here to learn from you, but you also to learn from us. Absolutely. And so we thank you so much. I want to thank the folks that have been doing this show together with, and want to wish you a very good evening. Have yourselves a good night.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.